Okay, so this is an introduction to the second part of Lab 4b. I have it marked. And again, this is tidying data, cleaning up data using the tidyr package. By now, you should be fairly comfortable with the dplyr package, which does a fair bit of things. And let's go ahead and share the screen here. So if you do want to learn more about these packages, there we go. You can go to tidyrorg and learn all about these packages. Again, so far we've used readr, which is how we bring things in. That's the read underscore commands. ggplot, we've certainly used a fair bit. dplyr, we've now used a couple times now, and then tidyverse is the new package we're going to use today. I'll mention tibble is the package that underscores those tibbles, which are like tables, but have a few other characteristics that work pretty nicely for us. So anyway, if you want to know more about any of these packages, you can go in here. You can click over and find the cheat sheet from the RStudio page, and it does kind of give a quick summary of that. And of course, that's in addition to our textbook, which does have a nice introduction to all of the different features of it. All right, so I'm going to take Lab4b, and I've already moved it over here to clean our markdown file, and I went ahead and saved it. So again, you want to update the author and the date before you turn it in to do that. So to start with, we'll load in the tidyverse package so that we can do analysis. So the tidyr package is specifically to help make your data tidy. And it has 4 commands: spread, gather, separate, and unite, which we're going to use. And there are actually 2 pairs of commands. And so here's a quick example that we can walk through. So here is just a quick data set that we put in here in line 44. So the idea is we put in the 6 subjects that we measured. We measured their sex, and then we measured their weight pre, mid, and post. And so it seems like a pretty good system of analysis here. And it certainly counts as tidy because each row is a dude, each row is an observation, and we can make some other things going there. Now, we could also represent data another way, which is that for subject 1, we could treat each row as an observation so that subject 1 has 3 rows, pre, mid, and post. And depending what you're doing, one of those might be more useful than the other. And especially when we graph, turning your data into this will let us put more things on one graph than we could have done the other way. So the gather command is a little more complicated than some of the commands we've done before, but it uses these 2 things called key and value. And so the key variable is just what we're going to call the new variable. So in this case, we called it time. And the value is the variable that's going to hold all of that data. So here's our example. So again, key is time and value is weight. So we put the key in to mean this variable, and weight is the new variable that holds all those. So that's different than before when we had pre, mid, and post as 3 columns. And so when we go ahead and do that here with the gather command, we get data that looks just like what we said. Okay, so like I said, there are several things that you might do with that, but one would be if we wanted to make graphs. So if we wanted to make histograms going across, we're going to use this gather command to stack up the data on top of each other so that we can then make all of the charts go together. So now we've made mid, post, and pre 3 histograms that show the weights of the people. Okay, so notice that it hasn't done anything to the data points. All the data points are still there. Also, because we didn't actually do a assignment variable, we didn't make a new variable, the data itself hasn't changed at all. All we did was do this processing and make the graph kind of in real time. Now, one thing that's sort of weird is that mid, post, and pre are not the order that you would probably put something in. You would probably put the pre-test first, then the middle point, and then the post. But we didn't put those in order, and in the absence of that, it uses alphabetical order, which is a totally fine way to put things in order. So if we want there to be things in order, then we actually just list them in the order that we want them to go. And so when we do that, it makes the same thing. And now pre, mid, and post go in the order that you want. I should mention the facet wrap command. This is, again, one of the options from the ggplot sheet. I'll pull it up here. And facet wrap just puts multiple charts in one image so that you can display them nicely. All right, so here's a couple questions for you to have doing that. Spread is the opposite of gather. So if spread stacks up the data, spread unstacks it or spreads it out. So again, here is our new variable where we actually, now I did do the assignment variable, so now I did make this data set. Spread, all it does is it just needs key and value listed again, and now it's going to work backwards. So here is our new data set, which is actually our old data set. So gather is going to be really useful for stacking things up. Spread is useful for spreading it back out. Okay, so the other two commands, separate and unite, do a similar thing, but they do it within a variable. So, for instance, you could imagine here's a quick data frame of several of our faculty and how long we've been at Truman. And you can see here we are all listed, and it has last name, comma, first name, and I'm down there, Alberts, comma, Scott, because that's me. And you could easily imagine that you'd like to have last name and first name as two separate variables. It's easy to see they're separated by a comma, and here we go. We just put the variable. Into is what we're going to call the new variable names, and sep is the thing that separates them. So here we go. Faculty is now going to be separated like that, and now we have last name and first name. Right, so here's a note that I made to myself that I have real trouble spelling the word separate. I always want to spell it with an ER instead of an AR. And so if that's a problem you have, I apologize in advance, but nothing to be done around that. It's not actually a British spelling or anything, so you got to just figure out how to spell separate. Now, you can use this for things like names. You could use it for dates. You could imagine, 5/20/2009, and you could separate them into day, month, and year. Unite goes the other way, and so here are the dates listed as first as three separate variables. Right here, we just entered them in with the C command, and then we use the unite command to smush them all into a date, which we called column, and then we just used month, day, and year, and we separated them with a slash. Why did we separate them in slash? Because that's how we wanted the data to look. So here are all of our dates. All right, so the last thing I want to mention is a little bit more complicated, but this is from one of the other lectures that we had. And here is, again, just a student, their major, what classes they took, and what their test score was on this given, I don't know, senior test or whatever it is. Okay, and so maybe instead of having it like this, we wanted to make columns where you have one column for stat 190, one column for stat 220, and you want to have a 1 or 0 for whether or not they took it or not. So you'd think separate would do that, and if you do that, you don't quite get it. What you do get is the first class, the second class, and the second class. The first, second, and third classes all in their own variable. But instead, what we want to do is not actually separate, but first we want to gather them all up into one column. So here's what we've done instead. We've now made multiple copies of an individual student. So here's the same student who took the chem class, or a chem major who took stat 190, and here's that same student who took the other stat class. And now each observation is a row rather than each person. Now, we do have these extra NAs, which is sort of weird because since it did assume that you had 3 classes, if you don't have any, it made an NA for those. So we can filter those using just the filter command, and then we can get rid of that extra column variable to do that. And so now here we have this. Now what we want to do is separate. So we're going to instead, again, build these together. So we're going to separate kind of backwards into these class variables. And now we have it like this. And notice that just the ones are here. So it's kind of a fake variable of just ones. And again, you can take your time and look at that variable and see how it's set up. Again, in that way that tidyverse tries to be self-documenting, we're separating, we're gathering, we're filtering, we're selecting, meaning getting rid of that other column, and then we're mutating all of the ones into a number 1. All right, finally, we don't want the variable to have just ones and NAs. Like this, we want them to have ones and zeros. So we're going to put one last thing in here, which is fill, which says that we're going to put any missing values, we're going to put a 0 in it. So again, this is sort of a complicated way, but now this command is going to put all the pieces together. We separated, we gathered, we filtered, we selected, we mutated, and we spread. Right? Super complicated? Sure. Can you figure it out? I think so. So here we go. Now we have a column for stat 190, 210, 220, 290. Each one has zeros and ones. Okay, so the last homework question is just kind of a little challenge question to ask you to do this little extra thing, and you get a couple points of extra credit if you do it. All right, so that is the tidyr package. Again, it only has a couple of commands in it. Spread and gather, separate and unite. And I think using those, you'll see that combined with the dplyr package, you can actually do really powerful data cleaning fairly easily, but more importantly, fairly cleanly, so that an outside person could totally figure out what you've done. The next person in your position, the person who inherits the job when you get promoted or you leave the company, will totally be able to follow up where you left off. So, all right, thanks.